On the day I was supposed to try on my wedding dresses with my boyfriend of 7 years, I rushed over to the bridal boutique and arrived with a heart full of happiness. As I walked inside, it just so happened I heard my boyfriend talking to his friend. "You had just registered your marriage with and at the civil affair office yesterday. Now you are here, taking Kelly Thomas to try on the wedding dresses. Don't you have any worry what kind of mess Kelly will do to you if she knows?" There was a helpless look on my boyfriend's face as he answered in a hoarse voice. "My brother passed away in a car accident and is carrying his child. If I don't step up and take her as my wife, how will they survive? I'll spend my whole life making it up to Kelly. Just keep your mouth shut. She must never know about this," he added. My heart shattered as the world seemed to collapse around me. Then I turned quietly and made my way to the hospital to schedule an abortion. If he couldn't provide a complete family for me and my child, there was no point in keeping the baby. Their conversation had been like an icy dagger piercing through me, extinguishing every bit of joy I'd felt after receiving my pregnancy report earlier this morning. I woke up excited and rushed to the hospital to collect the results. I couldn't wait to tell him the good news in person at the boutique. However, before I could, he hit me with the cruelest truth. If he was already married to someone else, why bother holding a wedding with me? I didn't have time to answer my own question before the wedding boutique's designer approached with a bright smile. "Miss Thomas, the custom wedding dress Mr. Green commissioned for you has arrived. You can try it on now." Her words jolted me and pulled me back to reality. Lennox Green had poured his heart and soul into this wedding. He had done more than anyone else for it. The wedding ring and dress had both been designed and overseen by him. They were based entirely on my preferences. He even had engraved a few words inside the ring. It wrote, "Love one another, love without doubt." I had suggested hiring a designer to handle everything, hoping to lighten his burden, but he refused. "Designing everything myself shows sincerity," he had said. "I want you to look at these things and always think of me." When his friends and families knew about this, they all praised him. "You are going to be a wonderful husband in the future. Kelly, you sure are a lucky woman to be his fiancée." However, who could have imagined that his so-called love for me would become such a bitter irony? I steadied myself and headed toward the fitting room where the dress was displayed. That's when I saw a familiar figure. It was Garland. When she heard the assistant directing me, she turned and greeted me with a smile, her voice warm and friendly. "Kelly, you're finally here. Come and see how beautiful your wedding dress is." Her demeanor was as natural and kind as ever, just like a caring older sister. Back when Lennox's brother was alive, I had made a conscious effort to befriend her and shared gifts and tips to build a good relationship with the woman who I thought would be my future sister-in-law. If I had not accidentally heard the words that Lennox and his friend had uttered among them, I would never have imagined that she would become the uncrossable barrier between me and Lennox. The memory of their conversation replayed in my mind. My gaze instinctively dropped to her still flat stomach, and a wave of bitterness welled up inside me. No matter what, she had a safe harbor to rely on. Yet, my child and I did not have the privilege. With a dark face, I turned my attention to the lovely wedding dress and said, "It really is beautiful. Do you want to try it on?" The words had barely left my mouth when an incredulous voice interrupted. "Kelly, what are you saying? This is your wedding dress. How could you let someone else try it on?" Lennox strode over, his tone tinged with anger, his gaze filled with disapproval. I remained calm but my voice indifferent. "What's the big deal? I heard and didn't get to wear a wedding dress when she married your brother. Letting her try it on now could make up for that regret." When Ann and Lennox's brother got married, it was done in such haste that they only signed a marriage certificate, but did not hold a wedding banquet. Now, with Lennox giving her the title of wife, I thought, why not help her fulfill her unspoken dream of a wedding too? Anne's expression softened when she heard my words. After all, what woman had not dreamed of being a beautiful bride? Perhaps Lennox also felt that what I had just said made sense, so his expression shifted slightly and he refrained from saying anything further. Seeing his expression softened, I could see hesitation flash in Anne's eyes before she tentatively asked, "Can I really try it on?" I nodded and gestured for the staff to assist her in changing into the wedding dress. Meanwhile, Lennox had already dressed in his groom's suit. When he saw and was about to try on the wedding dress, he started loosening his tie as if ready to change out of his suit. However, I stopped him. "Anne is pregnant. She's already uncomfortable as it is. What if something happens to her and you're not here to help?" When he heard this, he stayed at put and stood silently beside me to wait for her, though his unease could be seen vividly in his eyes. Noticing the change in his mood, I sneered. Before long, and emerged from the fitting room with the help of the staff. Since her pregnancy hadn't started showing yet, and she had a similar frame to mine, the wedding dress fit her perfectly, and could not hide the excitement on her face though she tried to curb it by asking timidly, "Lennox, how do I look in this? Is it nice?" Her voice drew Lennox from his dazed state. His eyes, which had lingered on her for a while, turned lucid and he gave a soft hum. Just then, another staff member approached and gasped when he saw and, "Wow, the gown looks stunning on you. You two are the most perfect bride and groom I've ever seen." As soon as she said that, all the faces of those present changed, and cast an anxious glance at Lennox, then forced a polite smile and began to explain. No, you misunderstood." Before she could finish, I clapped my hands together and exclaimed sincerely, "You're right, and looks absolutely stunning. This dress seems like it was made just for her. How could I not let everyone appreciate such a beautiful sight?" Hearing my words, Lennox looked at me with disbelief written across his face. He knew me too well. I had always been protective of my things, especially something as meaningful as this wedding gown. However, now not only did I allow someone else to wear it, but I also praised her openly. He opened his mouth and said, "Kelly, you." I blinked innocently and cut him off as I looked into his eyes. "Relax, I'm just saying. Anyway, I just remembered I have urgent work to finish at the office and have to return to the office in a hurry, so I'll leave you two to it." Without waiting for a reply, I turned and headed straight for the door of the bridal boutique. When he saw this, Lennox was about to follow me but reached out and stopped him. As I walked to the wedding boutique's door, I glanced back and saw Lennox carefully supporting, and as they headed toward the fitting room. His touch was gentle, and his focus solely directed on her, as if no one else existed in his world. At that moment, I was in a trance. Was it truly responsibility that led him to marry her as he mentioned? Or had he fallen for her? I didn't have the answer, and I had no intention of humiliating myself by finding out. The next day, I arrived at the hospital for the pre-operative examination as scheduled. When the doctor asked about the child's father, I replied lightly, "He's busy with work and couldn't make it." That morning, when I woke up, I had considered telling him about the baby, but after several unanswered calls, I gave up. By the time the procedure was over, I was pale and weak, so I had to lean against the cold wall for support as I made my way out of the hospital. When I walked into the main lobby, I saw Lennox. He was accompanying Anne for a prenatal checkup. When they saw me, they looked dumbfounded. A flicker of surprise flashed in Lennox's face as he asked in puzzlement, "Are you sick? Why are you at the hospital alone?" Before I could answer, Anne stepped in. "Kelly, don't take your health lightly just because you're still young. No matter how busy you are at work, you have to take care of yourself. Don't let Lennox worry about you." Her tone carried a sense of concern, but beneath it lay a subtle distance I couldn't ignore. I pressed my lips together and agreed by humming. "I've already had my checkup. I just need to grab my medication, and then I can leave. You two should go ahead with your prenatal exam." Lennox's eyes filled with concern as he started toward me, but Anne tugged him back. "Lennox, it's almost our turn. Let's go in," she said, feigning discomfort as she rubbed her belly. "I don't know if it's because I've been overthinking lately, but my stomach hasn't been feeling great. I'm worried it might affect the baby." She emphasized the word baby, and the worry in his eyes dissipated instantly. Instead, guilt replaced it as he said, "Kelly, you should head home first. I'll come find you after I finish the checkup with Anne." I remember when his brother was still alive, he always addressed Anne as sister-in-law with utmost respect. Now though, he called her name with such familiarity. As I looked at the family of three, I couldn't help but realize how much of an outsider I had become. The man who once vowed to love me forever no longer held me in his heart. I recalled the times when he always put me first no matter what happened. A wave of bitterness welled up in my chest as I choked out, "All right, you two go ahead." On the way home, I stared out the car window at the familiar scenery flashing by. My mind replayed scenes from our past when we were always by each other's side. I had known Lennox since high school. Back then, he was my desk mate. He was a quiet, studious bookworm, while I was lively and mischievous kid. Since my parents were often busy with work, they were worried I couldn't take care of myself. They made me live on campus. I hated the cafeteria breakfasts, so I always pestered him to bring me food from outside. He would sigh in exasperation but always indulged me. This went on for 3 years. After high school, we naturally chose the same university. Having been classmates for so long, I couldn't help but gravitate toward him in the unfamiliar environment by seeking comfort and support from him. I relied on him for everything, and he never seemed to tire of helping me. My mom often scolded me. She said it wasn't right to trouble others so much. I shrugged off her words and relayed them to Lennox. At the time, he put down his pen and said nonchalantly, "Do you really think I'm some kind of pushover? Kelly, if I didn't like you, I wouldn't bother with you at all." His feelings for me were never hidden, and I had known from the very beginning. So I shamelessly basked in his kindness. When we finally got together, his love became even more unrestrained. With him around, I felt carefree, as if nothing in the world could ever trouble me. Knowing how much he had done for me, my mom used to joke that the hardest thing I'd ever faced in life was going to work. However, now, I realized she was wrong. The hardest thing I ever faced wasn't work. It was the fact that the man I loved married someone else, and I was the last one to know. Tears blurred my vision as I recalled those memories, and by the time I realized it, my face was already soaked with tears. The taxi driver noticed and handed me a tissue. "Young lady, there's no hurdle you can't overcome. Keep moving forward and good fortune is waiting for you just ahead. I accepted the tissue and thanked him through my sobs. After paying the fare, I was about to call a friend to vent when I absent-mindedly opened my social media feed. That's when I saw N's latest post from just 5 minutes ago, and posted a picture of an ultrasound picture, and one of Lennox lowering to examine a medical report. The caption read, "Baby, hurry up, come out. Your mommy and daddy can't wait to see you." When I scrolled down the post, I noticed that the first one to comment was Lennox's mother. She wrote, "Grandma is very excited too. I can't wait to see my first grandson." The comment section was flooded with replies from the Green family. It was evident from their words that they all knew about Lennox's marriage to Anne. I thought back to the day I visited the Green family a few days ago. They treated me so warmly then, and now it all felt like a sick joke. I could not help but wonder, were they secretly laughing behind my back when I was talking about our wedding plan to the Green family? My boyfriend was already married to someone else, and there I was, blissfully planning a sham wedding. I raised my hand, wiped the tears from my eyes, and went home. Before the wedding date between me and Lennox had been set, the Green family had already sent the customary gold jewelry and bridal gifts. Once I got home, I packed everything they had given me into a cardboard box. After that, I would sever all ties with the Green family. Following the abortion, my body was weak. I took a few days off work to rest. One afternoon, while I was half asleep, I vaguely sensed someone approaching. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw a familiar face. It was Lennox. He raised his and touched my hand. Realizing it was cold, he looked worried. "Kelly, are you sick? Let me take you to the hospital for a checkup, okay?" If this had been before, I would have thrown myself into his arms to seek comfort and warmth from him. However, now, I pulled my hand away from his, tucked it under the blanket, and said, "It's just a minor cold. There's no need to go to the hospital." Lennox didn't notice my lack of enthusiasm. He shook his head in exasperation. "If you were feeling unwell, why didn't you tell me? We're about to get married, so why are you keeping things from me?" When I heard the word married, it jolted me awake like a splash of cold water. Married? Oh right, he had got married. I glanced at the cardboard box in the corner and spoke softly. "That's right. Since we're getting married soon, you should take your things with you today." Although he and I did not live at my place, he would occasionally stay over for some period of time, so there were quite a few of his belongings at my place, and on the day I returned from the hospital, I had packed all his things. Lennox, oblivious to the shift in my tone, smiled warmly. "All right. Besides, after the wedding, we'll be moving into the new house anyway." I did not say anything. That evening, he made me a comforting bowl of hot vegetable beef soup with boiled eggs before leaving with his belongings. As he stepped out, I said quietly, "Don't come over again for the time being. I'm sick and don't want to risk infecting you. Stay home and focus on becoming the most handsome groom." He gave me a resigned smile, but agreed nonetheless. In the following days, he didn't visit but still texted me regularly. I replied with brief, perfunctory messages. Time flew by and soon, the wedding day arrived. I didn't put on the wedding dress Lennox had designed for me nor show up at the venue to embrace the future I had once dreamed of immediately. Instead, I purchased a high-speed train ticket to Levington State. Just before boarding, I received a call from the hotel staff. "Miss Thomas, when will you be arriving?" I forwarded Anne's photo to them and replied, "This is the real bride. I was just helping her rehearse. Please find her, help her get dressed and do her makeup." After the call, I methodically blocked and deleted every single way to contact Lennox. Then, I removed my SIM card, tucked it into my bag, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. I whispered, "Lennox, I wish you a memorable day." The grand ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was filled with the heavy, sweet scent of 500 white Casablanca lilies. Lennox stood near the arched floral trellis, his fingers twitching as he repeatedly adjusted the silk tie of his charcoal gray groom's suit. The fabric was Italian wool, custom-tailored to his precise measurements, with a small silver thread inscription inside the collar that I had chosen months ago. "Always. Lennox, dear," his mother, Mrs. Green, said as she walked over, her face flushed with the busy, self-important excitement of a society hostess. "The photographer is setting up for the family portraits. Where is Kelly? It's already 11:40. The guests are starting to take their seats in the chapel." "She's not answering her phone, Mom," Lennox said, staring down at his dark screen. "I've called her 10 times. She left a text last night saying she was staying at her apartment to rest because her cold was getting worse, but she should have been here by 10 for hair and makeup." "Oh, you know how girls are, Mrs. Green said, waving her hand dismissively. Probably a last-minute adjustment to her veil. "Go check the bridal suite downstairs." The coordinator said her gown was delivered there early this morning. Lennox nodded, though a faint, cold prickle of unease had begun to form at the back of his neck. He walked down the carpeted stairs to the lower level of the hotel, where the private dressing suites were located. He knocked on the heavy oak door marked Suite A. Kelly? He called out, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet hallway. Are you in there? The minister is here. The door was opened not by me, but by Evelyn, the hotel's senior wedding coordinator. She looked at Lennox with a strange, guarded expression, her hands resting tightly against her leather clipboard. Mr. Green, Evelyn said, her voice dropping into a professional, quiet register. We were just about to come find you. Is Kelly ready? Lennox asked, trying to look past her into the room. Miss Thomas is not here, Evelyn said. Lennox frowned. What do you mean she's not here? The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. She called the front office at 9 a.m., Evelyn said, her voice entirely devoid of the warmth she had displayed during our rehearsals. She informed us that she would not be attending today's event. She left specific instructions regarding the custom gown and this package. She stepped aside, allowing Lennox to see into the room. The custom-designed wedding dress, the one Lennox had spent 3 months designing, the one he had watched me try on with such quiet, detached focus, was hanging from the brass valance in the center of the room. But sitting on the velvet settee beneath the gown was Anne. She was already wearing her coat, her face pale, her fingers clutching a small, white envelope. On the table beside her sat a large cardboard box. Inside, visible through the open top, were the velvet cases containing the heavy gold necklaces, the bracelets, and the bridal gifts the Green family had sent to my apartment. And Lennox's voice was barely a whisper. What is this? Why are you in the bridal suite? And looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Lennox, Kelly sent this to the hotel. She had a courier deliver it to my apartment this morning, too. She handed him the small white envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of the marriage registration from the Municipal Civil Affairs Office, bearing the names of Lennox Green and Anne Garland, dated 4 days prior. Beneath the copy, written in my neat, familiar handwriting, was a single line. The real bride is already dressed. Don't keep your guests waiting. The high-speed train hummed as it sliced through the gray, northern landscape. Outside the window, the fields of my childhood dissolved into steep hills of dark pine and wet slate. It was raining, a soft, cold drizzle that blurred the distant yellow streetlights of Levington State. I sat in the window seat, my hands resting in my lap. My body felt light, almost hollow, the lingering soreness from the hospital room a dull, physical ache that reminded me I was still alive. I had taken my SIM card out of my phone 3 hours ago, dropping the tiny piece of plastic into a trash bin at the terminal. The sudden silence in my head was vast and clean. For 7 years, my life had been measured by his schedule, his calls, his family's needs. Now there was nothing but the steady, rhythmic click-clack of the steel rails beneath the carriage. When the train arrived at the station, the air was sharp and smelled of salt from the nearby harbor. I carried my single suitcase down the wet platform, my boots scuffing against the damp concrete. I had rented a small loft on the 3rd floor of a converted brick warehouse near the docks. The floors were dark, wide plank pine, and the large windows looked out over the gray water of the canal. There were no white lilies here, no custom dresses, no gold jewelry meant to buy my silence. I spent my first 3 days in Levington sleeping. I slept through the morning gray, through the afternoon rain, and through the quiet evenings when the harbor fog rolled in to cover the brick streets. When I woke, I would make a pot of black tea, sit on the edge of the unmade bed, and watch the cargo barges guide themselves down the channel. The physical recovery from the procedure was slow, but it gave me something tangible to focus on. I took the iron supplements the doctor had prescribed, ate hot broth from the small deli on the corner, and kept the rooms cold. The cold felt honest. On my 2nd week, I started my new job at a local landscape design firm. The office was located in an old greenhouse near the botanical gardens. Supervisor, a quiet woman named Nora who spent her weekends tending to orchids, handed me a stack of blueprints on my first morning. The Seaport Development Project, Nora said, tapping the paper with her pencil. We need a drainage layout for the salt-tolerant shrubs. Can you handle that, Kelly? I can, I said, taking the blueprints. I sat at my drafting table near the glass wall, the soft gray light of the Levington sky falling over my paper. As I drew the clean, precise lines of the drainage channels, I felt a quiet, settled peace in my chest. Numbers didn't have brothers who died in car accidents. Blueprints didn't ask you to understand their duty, while they secretly registered their marriage with someone else. If the scale was correct, the lines met. It was that simple. Back in our hometown, the wedding at the Grand Plaza had been canceled before the first guests could finish their champagne. The scandal had rippled through the local social circles like a sudden frost. Mrs. Green had fainted in the hotel lobby, and the Green family had been forced to issue a quiet, humiliated statement about a postponement due to family health matters. But the truth couldn't be postponed. Lennox sat at the dining table of his apartment, the room dark save for the pale light of his laptop. Across from him sat Anne, her hand resting on her stomach, her face pale and drawn. The apartment was filled with boxes, the cardboard boxes containing my things that Lennox had brought back from my place. He had spent 3 days trying to find me, visiting my parents' house, my office, even the small cafe where we used to have Sunday brunch. My parents had refused to let him pass the front gate. "You married your brother's widow, Lennox," my father had said through the iron intercom, his voice flat and hard as granite. "You made your choice. Do not come back to this house again." And Lennox said now, his voice raspy, his eyes bloodshot. "Why did you post that photo on social media?" We agreed we would wait until after the wedding with Kelly to tell the family about the registration." And looked down at the table, her fingers twisting her napkin. "Your mother said it was best, Lennox. She said if we posted the ultrasound and the registration, Kelly would have no choice but to accept it. She said Kelly loved you too much to leave." Lennox let out a low, dry laugh that sounded like dry leaves scraping across concrete. "She left, Anne. She didn't just leave. She gave you the dress. Returned every single piece of gold my mother ever gave her. I was just trying to protect my child." And whispered, her voice rising in defensive anger. "Your brother is gone. If you didn't marry me, the company's shares would have gone to his executors, and the baby would have had nothing. You promised him, Lennox. You promised him on his deathbed." "I promised him I would take care of you," Lennox said, standing up from the table. "I didn't promise him I would destroy my life." He walked into the spare bedroom, the room where he had stored my packed boxes. He sat down on the floor beside the largest box, his hand reaching out to touch the heavy cardboard. He had found the medical report from the municipal clinic on top of his things, the one I had left behind. Surgical termination of pregnancy. Patient, Kelly Thomas. Date, October 18th. Lennox held the paper in his hand, his thumb tracing the clean clinical stamp of the hospital. He had spent 7 years believing I was the one who relied on him, the one who was too soft to survive without his guidance. He had thought that by marrying Anne, he was making a noble sacrifice that I would eventually forgive because I had nowhere else to go. But I had gone, and I had taken his child with me. Lennox pressed his forehead against the cardboard box, a low, choked sob escaping his throat in the quiet, dark room. He was legally married to his brother's widow. He had the family shares, the security, and the title of husband. But his house was entirely empty. 2 years in Levington changed the way I walked. I no longer carried myself with the quiet, careful hesitation of a girl who was waiting for someone else's approval. I wore sturdy boots, a heavy wool coat that smelled of damp pine, and my hair was cut short, ending just above my collar. My design work at the greenhouse had grown. I was now the lead estimator for the municipal parks, spent my mornings coordinating with city engineers, and my afternoons walking the cold, gravel shores of the bay. I had built a small, quiet life. Clara, my colleague from the drafting room, had become a constant friend. We shared a small plot in the community garden near the canal, growing winter cabbages and small, hardy white roses that could survive the salt fog. "The roses are blooming early this year," Clara said, kneeling in the wet soil, as she trimmed the dead wood from the stems. "You should take a bunch for your kitchen, Kelly." "They're beautiful," I said, looking at the small, pale petals. They weren't Casablanca lilies. They were small, slightly irregular, but they were tough. They knew how to grow in the gray. "There's a man from the State Department here to see you," Nora called out from the greenhouse door. "He's got the approval signatures for the Seaport Park." I stood up, brushing the damp earth from my knees. "I'll be right there." I walked into the warm, glass-walled office, my boots scuffing against the gravel floor. A man was standing by the drafting table, his back to me. He was wearing a dark wool coat that looked too thin for the Levington spring, his shoulders hunched slightly as he looked at my sketches of the salt-tolerant shrubs. When he turned around, my heart didn't skip a beat. It was Lennox. He looked older. The study-worn bookworm of our university days had turned into a man with deep gray lines around his mouth and eyes that looked flat, like old glass. He looked at me with a sudden, desperate intensity that made his fingers twitch against his leather folder. "Kelly," he said. His voice was exactly the same, but it carried none of the power it used to have over me. It was just a sound, like the wind in the glass panels above our heads. "Lennox," I said, stepping behind the counter to pick up my pencil. "Do you have the signed permits from the state board?" Lennox looked at the pencil in my hand, then at the sturdy, practical boots I was wearing, and finally at my short hair. I took the contract for the Levington district specifically, so I could find you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I've been checking the municipal Registries for 18 months. Kelly. Please. Just 5 minutes. I have a meeting with the city engineer in 20 minutes, Lennox, I said, my voice quiet and professional. If you have the permits, I can sign for them. Now. And we're divorcing, he said, taking a step closer to the counter, his hands reaching out as if to touch the wood between us. The estate is settled. The child is 2 years old now, and the trustees have set up the fund. I did my duty, Kelly. I did what my mother and my brother asked of me. Now I'm free. I looked at him. I looked at his damp coat, his tired eyes, and the desperate, selfish hope that had brought him 18 hours north to this cold greenhouse. He still thought of his betrayal as a duty that could be paid off like a bank loan. He still thought that after 2 years of silence, after the hospital room, after the gold box on the table, we could simply restart the clock. Lennox, I said gently, do you remember what you said to Josh at the boutique? Lennox flinched, his face turning the color of wet slate. You said you would spend your whole life making it up to me, I said. But you didn't understand. You can't make up for a lie by telling another one. You married and because it was easy for your family. You lied to me because you thought I was too weak to leave. I loved you, he cried, his voice drawing a brief, startled look from Nora in the next room. I've loved you since we were 14, Kelly. You know that. You loved the way I relied on you, Lennox, I said, closing my file. You loved being the bookworm who could solve every problem for the lively, mischievous kid. But I'm not 14 anymore. And I don't need you to bring me breakfast. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out the signed receipt block and slid it across the counter toward him. Sign here, please, I said. Lennox stared at the receipt. His hand shook so violently that he dropped his pen twice before he could write his name on the line. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes wet with tears that he didn't try to hide. Is there really nothing left, Kelly? Not even a memory. I have many memories, Lennox, I said, taking the signed paper from his hand. But they belong to a girl who died in a hospital room 2 years ago. I'm just her sister. I offered him a polite, brief nod. Have a safe trip back, I said. I turned and walked through the glass door into the community garden, the cold, salt-scented wind of Levington hitting my face as I knelt back down in the dark earth beside Clara. Everything okay? Clara asked, handing me the shears. Everything is fine, I said, reaching out to trim a dead branch from the hardy white rose. Let's finish the planting before the fog comes in.